Frank Carson hadn't opened his daughter's yearbook in over 2 decades. It had been buried in a box in the attic, next to her varsity hoodie, a few dried-up sketchbooks, and a framed photo of the 3 of them, taken in the school courtyard. Alicia, in her blazer and khaki skirt, beamed between her proud parents at Riverpoint Academy. That was the last summer they were still a family. She was 17 when she vanished. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening, June 3rd. She had just wrapped up finals and talked about taking a photography scholarship. She said she was heading to the library, then for a walk to clear her head. She never came back. There was no sign of struggle, no notes, just her camera, left in the park. The last photo on the roll showed an empty street at dusk, nothing more. For 22 years, Frank had lived with silence. His wife, Lori, passed away in 2003, worn down by grief. The house had grown still, untouched. But today, something made him open that yearbook. He turned slowly through the pages until he found her. Alicia Carson, 3rd row, class of 1990, with that same quiet smile, brown hair tucked neatly behind her ear. A red circle had once been drawn around her face. Lori had done that for a church. Bulletin after she vanished. He sighed. Then his eyes drifted to the next page. It was a group layout, 8 formal portraits. Boys in ties, girls in blazers. One photo, 2nd row, far right, caught his attention. The nameplate read Jason Murray, but something was odd. The name had been written in heavy ink, almost like it was covering something underneath. Frank squinted. The photo was clean, too clean. Alicia had never mentioned anyone named Jason, no boyfriends, no close friends even. She was quiet, focused on art, and always stayed a little distant from crowds. So why was Jason Murray's photo bookmarked? Frank flipped to the back cover and found a note in faint red ink in Alicia's handwriting. If he asks about June 1st, lie. His chest tightened. What happened on June 1st? Why would she lie? And what did Jason Murray have to do with any of it? Frank turned to the old family portrait beside him. Alicia stood confidently between him and Lori in her school uniform. But now, for the first time, her smile felt like a mask. Frank searched for Jason Murray online and found something chilling. Jason legally changed his last name in 1992, 2 years after Alicia disappeared. Frank wasn't great with technology, but the name Jason Murray had burned itself into his brain. He typed it into the search bar. Dozens of results appeared. Most were too young, a few too old. One was a dentist in Idaho, another a mechanic in Texas. But then he found a local article, dated 1992, titled, Name Change Approved in Confidential Petition. The name listed was Jason Michael Murray, now changed to James M. Riddell, with no reason given. Frank's breath caught. The petition had been filed just 2 years after Alicia disappeared, in the same county. He dug further. James Riddell had no digital footprint until 1994. No social media, no business registrations, no marriage license, just one property deed for a farmhouse 80 miles away from River Point. But that wasn't what got to him. It was the scanned court file. In the margins, handwritten in pen, were 2 words scribbled faintly by a clerk. Safety concern. Frank leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. Why would a high school senior need a name change for safety? He printed the page and stared at it. The school photo of Jason, no, James, had that kind of face you could lose in a crowd. Polite. Smile, hair neatly parted, forgettable. But Alicia had remembered him enough to warn herself in red ink. If he asks about June 1st, lie. He returned to the box where he'd found the yearbook. At the very bottom was one of Alicia's journals. He hesitated. It felt invasive, but she was gone, and maybe she'd left him breadcrumbs. The journal's last pages were mostly blank, then scrawled in nervous handwriting. He knows about the photos. I didn't think he'd go that far. I didn't think he'd follow me home. Frank closed the journal and stared at the wall. What photos? What had Alicia seen across town? Detective Sarah Kendrick sat in her cruiser outside a boarded-up property, a tip that had come in months ago. A caller had claimed the house used to belong to a man named James Riddell. The caller said he'd heard screaming in the basement once. Sarah had filed it under low priority, but now she wasn't so sure. Frank picked up Alicia's old camera from the box. Inside, still undeveloped after 22 years, was a half-used roll of film with a label, June 1st, Keep. Frank hadn't touched a film canister in years, but the one now sitting in his palm, dusty, faded, labeled in his daughter's handwriting, made his fingers tremble. June 1st, Keep was written in all caps, underlined twice. He drove to the only photography lab in town that still processed old film, run by a retired newspaper photographer named Walt. The place smelled like chemicals, paper, and nostalgia. Walt eyed the canister and whistled softly. "Been a while since I've seen one of these. Can you still develop it?" Frank asked. Walt nodded. "I'll try. Might be degraded, but if anything's on it, I'll find it." He left Frank waiting in the car while he went into the darkroom. 30 minutes crawled by. When Walt came out, his face was pale. "There's something you need to see." They laid the printed photos out on a light table. There were 10 images. The first few were normal, Alicia's usual style. A shot of the town square, a close-up of flowers, a pair of girls laughing near the bleachers, a dog lying under a truck. Then came the 6th photo, a blurry image taken through a classroom window. Inside, a boy and a girl stood too close. The boy's hand was gripping the girl's wrist. Her expression was frozen mid-shock. The angle was tilted, hurried, like Alicia had snapped it in a rush. Walt leaned in. "Is that Jason?" Frank said quietly. "Jason Murray, now James Riddell." The 7th and 8th photos showed Alicia's bedroom mirror, with words scrawled in red lipstick. "He said he'd find me." Then the 9th, a shadowed figure outside their house, time-stamped 9:13 p.m., June 2nd, visible in Alicia's camera overlay. The figure was standing by the tree line, staring at the front porch light. The 10th was the most haunting. A photo of Alicia herself taken from behind. She was walking down their driveway alone, clutching her camera. The flash reflection in the corner of the frame proved it. Someone else took the photo. Frank's breath caught in his chest. It wasn't a selfie, nor on a timer. Someone had been there, watching her leave, following her. That night, Detective Sarah Kendrick opened the basement door of the Riddell property. It creaked like it hadn't moved in years. The air smelled like dust, mildew, and something faintly metallic. In the far corner behind a stack of old crates, she found a crate of tapes, dozens, all labeled with initials, and one read AC 690. Frank got a call from Detective Kendrick. She said, "I think you need to come in. We found something, and it might be your daughter's voice." The tape was marked AC 690 in red marker, buried beneath decades of dust and silence in the basement of James Riddell's abandoned farmhouse. There were others too, with initials and dates scrawled in the same hand, some unreadable, some heartbreakingly clear. But this one, Detective Sarah Kendrick held in her gloved hands like it might break. Back at the station, she transferred the cassette to digital. She didn't call Frank until she'd listened to the first 60 seconds. Then she did. Frank sat in the small viewing room at the precinct, headphones on, eyes closed. He didn't want to hear it, but he needed to. The audio clicked on, faint static, then a soft inhale. Alicia's voice, "Okay, I'm recording now." She sounded calm, but not safe. "It's Saturday. I'm in the den. Mom and Dad are asleep. If someone finds this, I need you to know I'm not just skipping town. I'm not rebelling. I didn't run away. He's following me." A pause, then breathing. "I think his name's not really Jason. I found something in the darkroom at school. An envelope with photos. I don't know who they're of, but I think he does. He said I shouldn't talk, but I already did. I told Mrs. Haywood. Another pause. Long. I think he knows. The tape crackled. Then her voice dropped lower. I'm going out tomorrow just to clear my head. I'll take the camera, maybe leave something just in case. I love you, Dad. If you're hearing this, I guess something happened. Then silence. Frank took the headphones off slowly, eyes brimming. He looked up at Detective Kendrick. Mrs. Haywood. She was the school counselor. Kendrick nodded. Still alive? I lives in a retirement home outside town. I want to talk to her, Frank said. That evening, Kendrick visited the rest of the tapes. She picked one labeled LM88. The initials didn't match any known case, but the voice inside sounded like another teenage girl, scared, shaking, begging to go home. In the background, a man's voice, too quiet to understand, steady, rehearsed, deliberate. Frank visited Mrs. Haywood. The moment he said, Alicia Carson, the woman stiffened and whispered. She came to me in tears, said she saw something she wasn't supposed to. I told her to stay quiet. The retirement home smelled like lemon cleaner and old wood. Mrs. Eleanor Haywood had been the school counselor at Riverpoint Academy for nearly 25 years. Frank remembered her from PTA meetings. Kind eyes, always calm, the type of person who made kids feel safe. But when he mentioned Alicia's name, her hands began to tremble. She came to me the day before she disappeared, Mrs. Haywood said quietly. June 2nd. Frank leaned forward. What did she tell you? She was scared. She said she'd developed some photos in the dark room after hours. They weren't hers, but someone had left them in her tray. Mrs. Haywood paused. She thought it was a mistake at first, but then she recognized someone in them. Jason Murray. Mrs. Haywood hesitated. That's the name she used. But she said she'd seen that boy before in a different photo, one taken years earlier at a school event. But he looked exactly the same. Frank frowned. What do you mean? She thought the pictures had been staged, like someone was pretending to be a student. Frank's mind reeled. Did you report it? Mrs. Haywood shook her head slowly. I told her to put it away. I thought she was imagining things. I didn't want her to get hurt. Frank stood, angry, heartbroken. She was trying to protect herself. She left a tape. She trusted you. Mrs. Haywood's eyes welled with tears. I was wrong. Then she said something that made Frank stop in his tracks. She left me something that day, a photo. She said not to look at it unless she didn't come back. I've kept it in my desk drawer all these years. She stood, slowly, and crossed the room. From a wooden desk, she retrieved a sealed envelope. Inside was a photograph, a candid shot taken in a school hallway, locker-lined walls, fluorescent light. In the foreground, Alicia's friend Hannah was smiling mid-laugh. But in the background, caught in the mirror of a trophy case, stood a young man wearing a school uniform, face expressionless. It was Jason. Only one problem. The date printed in the photo's corner was 1984, 6 years before Alicia's class, before Jason was even a student at Riverpoint, before he should have been old enough to attend. And yet, it was him. Unmistakable. Same face, same eyes, same posture. Frank stared at the image. What the hell is this? Meanwhile, Detective Kendrick was reviewing tapes in the evidence room. She clicked play on one marked TH87. The girl on the tape whispered, "He's not in any yearbooks. He just shows up and no one notices." Then silence. Frank flipped the photo over. Alicia had written in pencil, "He doesn't age. He finds new names, new schools." Frank sat alone in the diner across from the precinct, staring at the photo like it was a ghost. Jason, no, James, hadn't just changed his name. He'd changed his entire story, and apparently, he'd done it before. Alicia's note echoed in Frank's mind. He doesn't age. He finds new names, new schools. Frank opened his laptop and typed in, River Point Academy Alumni Archive. The records were sparse but digitized enough to dig. He started with the class of 1990. Jason Murray, there he was. Class of 89, also there, slightly different name. Michael. Jarrett, same face, different haircut, no mention of a brother. Then the class of 84. Frank's fingers shook. Jeremy Martin, same face again. Every 5 or 6 years, a new school, a new last name, a different town, always enrolled as a junior or senior, always in private schools, and always somehow in the background of missing persons cases. Frank scribbled notes as he went. 1984. Jeremy Martin, River Point Academy. 1989. Jason Murray, same school. 1992. James Riddell, transfer to Fremont Prep. 1997. Marcus Reeve, name attached to a defunct academy in Illinois. Every timeline came with a whisper of a girl who disappeared. No one ever convicted, no one ever questioned. It was like chasing a shadow that changed shape every time you blinked. Across town, Detective Kendrick was running her own database check on the tapes recovered. So far, 4 sets of initials matched unsolved missing girl cases from the 1980s and 90s, all within 200 miles of River Point. It was no longer a theory, it was a pattern. And somehow, Jason, or whatever his real name was, had never been arrested, never even flagged, because each time he changed, he erased the trail behind him. Frank returned to the precinct and met Kendrick in the hallway. She handed him a file. We may have found his original name, the first one. Frank flipped it open. A boarding school record from 1979, a black and white class photo, same face, name Adam S. Kane, age 17, reported runaway, never found. Kendrick said, I think that's where it began. He disappeared from that identity and started assuming others. Frank stared at the page, his voice low. How does someone keep doing this for 30 years? Kendrick didn't answer, but in her eyes, a flicker of fear. That night, a cold case analyst emailed Kendrick something new, a student ID photo from 2004, out of state, private academy, name Evan Kyle, same eyes, same smile, now 42 years old, still passing for 18. Frank opened the next tape. A girl whispered, he keeps the hair, the eyes, but always changes the name. Always says he's new, always finds the quiet ones. The school librarian didn't remember much from 1990, but when Detective Kendrick showed her the yearbook photo, Alicia's pressed daisy bookmark, and the red-penned warning, something clicked. She came in the day before she went missing, the librarian said, quiet, shaking. Asked if we had a copy machine she could use. She was holding something, a manila envelope. She didn't want anyone to see what was in it. Kendrick leaned forward. Did she leave anything behind? The librarian nodded, almost hesitantly. A book. It's still in the archive room. I remember because it had no checkout card. She said it was a donation. The book was a dusty hardcover, copy of Fahrenheit 451. Inside the front cover was a note, handwritten, folded tightly. Frank opened it. If anything happens to me, please don't forget his name isn't real. Check the negatives. June 1st, start with the trophy case. Beneath the note was an envelope of photo negatives, still intact after 2 decades. Kendrick had them developed at the lab. Most were blurred, overexposed, but one was crystal clear. A photo of Jason Murray standing in the hallway, wearing a visitor's badge time-stamped April 1990, 2 months before he officially enrolled. Frank sat in stunned silence. He was never supposed to be there, Kendrick muttered. He wasn't a student. He infiltrated the school. He targeted her. And she knew, Frank whispered. She tried to tell someone, maybe everyone, but she waited too long. That evening, Kendrick revisited the last section of the AC 690 tape. It was damaged, warped, but a single sentence came through clearly. If you're hearing this, he's already gone, but someone has to stop him because he'll do it again. Detective Kendrick received a new tip. Someone in Florida reported a transfer student at a private school using the name Evan Kyle, who looked far too old to be 17. Frank had never been to Florida, but he boarded the flight without hesitation. Detective Kendrick had pulled strings. A private academy near Gainesville had reported a student named Evan Kyle, recently transferred in, with no transcripts, no social media, just a paper trail that began 6 months ago. The registrar had grown suspicious. He's polite, almost too polite, but there's something off. We thought maybe it was trauma. But then he started helping out in the darkroom, teaching photography. We didn't even know he had that background. Kendrick brought Alicia's developed negatives. Frank brought the photo. They arrived on a humid Thursday afternoon. The school was modern, clean, red brick, glass doors, palm trees in the parking lot. The headmaster was waiting for them. "I can't believe it's the same person," he said quietly after seeing the evidence. "We need to see him," Kendrick replied. They led them to a photography classroom at the far end of the campus. Through the window, Frank saw him standing over a table, adjusting light levels with a student. His hair was shorter, darker now, clean-shaven, wearing glasses, but the eyes were the same, dead calm. Frank felt his throat close. That was him, the man from the yearbook, the man from the reflection in Alicia's mirror, the man in the last photo on her camera. Kendrick stepped in first. "Evan," she said, as he turned, startled but composed. "Yes," he responded. She showed her badge. "We'd like to speak to you privately." He didn't run, didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled, small, practiced, and said, "Of course." They led him to an empty conference room. Frank stayed silent, seated in the corner. Kendrick placed a folder on the table. Inside were the photo from 1984, the school registry under Adam S. Kane, the photo of Alicia's driveway, the notes, the tape transcript. He scanned the documents calmly, then looked up and said nothing. Kendrick asked, "What's your real name?" He shrugged lightly. "Does it matter?" Frank finally spoke. "You took my daughter." For a moment there was silence. Then he replied, "I didn't take her. She followed me." Kendrick slammed her hand on the table. "Where is she?" He leaned back, folded his arms, and said softly, "You're asking the wrong question." Frank's voice cracked. "You said she followed you? That's a lie." The man, Evan, Kyle, Jason Murray, Adam Kane, didn't blink. "You see it that way because you think she was taken, but Alicia wanted answers. I just gave her a path." Detective Kendrick narrowed her eyes. "What does that mean?" He looked straight at her. She saw the same thing I saw, the emptiness behind the rules, the lies in the walls of that school. I didn't choose her. She chose to know more, to dig. Frank's fists clenched. "She was 17. The man nodded. "Yes, and more awake than most adults I've met." Kendrick placed the photo on the table, Alicia's final shot, her silhouette walking down the driveway. "Where did she go?" He stared at it a long time, then finally said, "She ran, but not away. She ran with something I gave her. Evidence, stories, names." Kendrick frowned. "What names?" he exhaled. "She wanted to go to the press, but she realized no one would believe her without more, so she left to gather proof. I told her it wouldn't." "Be safe," Frank's voice trembled. "And you let her go?" "No," he said. "I tried to stop her, but she slipped through both of us." He reached into his coat pocket carefully, pulled out a yellowed envelope, and pushed it toward Frank. Inside were 2 Polaroids. One showed a roadside motel, dated June 6, 1990. Alicia, alive, thin, wearing a hoodie, looking over her shoulder. The other was a scan of a letter, typed, unpublished, addressed to the Boston Globe, titled, "How to Disappear When They're Watching Everything." Signed A.C. Frank stared at the page. Kendrick leaned closer. Did she make it? Jason, Evan, Adam, whoever he was, looked away. I don't know. She said she'd contact me if she could. She never did. But you kept the letter. He nodded. She mattered. Frank stood. No, she was my daughter, and she mattered before you ever looked at her. Frank stood at the edge of Marshview Lake, the same place Alicia used to photograph dragonflies in the summer. He held the envelope in one hand, the Polaroid, the letter, and Alicia's journal in the other. Her words still echoed in his head. I didn't run away. I just couldn't stay. He hadn't cried during the interview, not when the truth emerged, not when they unmasked the man who had changed names like seasons. But now, in the golden silence of dusk, something cracked inside him. Because even though she might have survived, even though she may have escaped, she was still gone. Detective Kendrick stood beside him. He'll face charges, she said. False documentation, identity fraud, maybe more if other families step forward. Frank nodded. But not for Alicia, he said quietly. No, there was no crime to prosecute, no confirmed body, no trace beyond 1990. She had vanished. Not by force, not by death, but by choice. She had become a whisper in the cracks of a broken system. A few weeks later, Frank boxed up the last of Alicia's belongings. He kept one thing, the book she left in the library. Inside it, taped to the inside cover now, was the photo of her in the hoodie, looking over her shoulder, alive. He framed it and placed it on the mantel, not as a memorial, but as a reminder that some disappearances aren't endings. They're acts of resistance. He no longer needed the answer to where she went. He only needed to believe that wherever she was, she knew someone had never stopped looking.